Hello YouTube. So a while back, I did a video on what I believe are the most overrated characters in Genshin Impact. Today, I'm going to be talking about what I believe are the most underrated 5-star characters. The overrated characters video was a top 5 list, but there are a lot more underrated at 5 stars than overrated in my opinion. So making the list with only 5 characters is much harder this time. So, this is just going to be a list of characters that I think are underrated and in no particular order. Also keep in mind that this list is based on what I have seen from my perspective. You may not have seen people underrate these characters as much as I have, and you may have seen other characters get underrated more than these characters, so your list would probably look different than mine. But do let me know in the comments what your list would be. With that said, let's jump right into this. Klee isn't a very popular character, and I believe a lot of people underestimate her because they misunderstand why she isn't popular. I have seen a lot of people think that Klee's lack of popularity is due to being very clunky to play while having low DPS. The first part is true. Most people find Klee to be extremely clunky to play, not only because of her awkward animations and cancels, but also because she is a child model catalyst user, meaning she has very little poise. These are all very valid criticisms about Klee. However, the part about her having low DPS is not. Klee's Monopyro team is a very competent team when it comes to damage output and DPS, while being good for both single target and AoE. It cheats similarly to teams like Vaporize Yoimiya and Mono Geo Ito at around 63k DPS. While this doesn't compete with the DPS of teams like Wanderer and Tainari, this is still very good DPS. I've also seen people claim that Klee is weaker or only slightly better than Yanfei, but if that was true, Yanfei would be on par with and better than a lot of 5-star units, which is obviously not true. If it was, a lot more people would play and talk about her. Also, I feel like a lot of people don't realize how insane Klee's C2 can be. At Constellation 2, Klee can provide 23% defense stretch for the team with the bombs from her skill. This turns her into an amazing support, providing this defense shred as well as Thrilling Tales and even Pyro Resonance, depending on the team. In teams where a C2 Klee can fit in, this can absolutely skyrocket the damage output. No one really seems to talk about this. This is probably because no one is willing to invest into a C2 Klee for this, which is fair, but for anyone who does have a C2 Klee, this is an amazing use for her. So, I believe what we have allowed to happen to Diluc's reputation is absolutely criminal. People treat him as being a very weak DPS, which is just not true. It feels to me as if people still evaluate him based on his 1.0 team's performance, that team being Diluc, Bennett, Sucrose, Xingqiu. But Diluc has gotten a lot of improvements since then. You can now use Yelan instead of Xingqiu, which is massive since Yelan does more damage, buffs, and allows you to do shorter rotations. You can now use Kazuha for, again, shorter rotations, better buffing, and way better grouping. Way more people have Bennett C6 now, and Bennett C6 is massive for Diluc because it makes his rotations more flexible since he no longer needs to burst right away to get his Pyro infusion, and the 15% damage bonus is a good damage increase as well. He has even gotten better weapons, with Beacon being his new best weapon, and Redhorn his second best weapon. He's even gotten the Mailed Flower as a good new free-to-play weapon. And believe it or not, quite a number of people have Constellation 6 Kaya now, which makes Diluc's Melt team very strong. Melt Diluc with C6 Kaya comes out to around 66k DPS, which is very competent with other 5-star DPS. Now, people will always be quick to point out that it only cheats this high with a C6 Kaya, and a lot of people don't have this still, but even then, his Vaporized team with Yelan is still plenty strong, which calcs at around 62k. He is definitely not a top tier DPS, but he is way more competent than he is made out to be. And remember, he actually has pretty good AoE, unlike Yoimiya and Tutao, and doesn't have Klee's clunkiness. So, I originally wasn't going to have Wanderer on this list, but with all the complete nonsense I've seen people say about him during this current rerun, has made me realize that he is criminally underrated. If you saw the video I did responding to Shortcut's Wanderer video, you will know that there are people willing to just flat out lie in order to make you think less of Wanderer. And even with C6 Farazan involved, a lot of people seem to not realize just how strong he is. Like, When people see my calcs comparing team DPS of different 5-star DPS compared to each other, there was always someone surprised to see that Wanderer cheats the highest. And if you aren't familiar with Wanderer's numbers, I can imagine it would be surprising seeing that he beats even Hu Tao in a single target calc, despite his performance not being limited to single target like hers. And that's what makes Wanderer such an insane unit. Most other units excel at 1 or 2 of single target AoE or multi-wave, while falling off in 1 or 2 of those categories. Example, Hu Tao falls off in AoE, Nilou falls off in single target, and Cyno falls off in multi-wave, and so on. But Wanderer just excels at all 3 of these at the same time. This is something that many people seem to be unaware of with this power level, and even theory crafters that absolutely should know this don't acknowledge it for whatever reason. And on the point of AoE, this is another thing that people heavily downplay with him. His AoE is treated by a lot of people as not being good. The common argument for this is his charged attacks ungroup and his normal attacks have bad AoE. His charged attacks definitely can ungroup enemies, but you aren't supposed to be spamming them in the first place. Charged attack spam is a suboptimal combo, and if you are doing N2C, there should be enough space between each charged attack to prevent much ungrouping from happening. Furthermore, the idea that his normal attacks have bad AoE is just a massive misconception. They have a very similar AoE size to his charged attacks, but without the ungrouping. The only caveat is that depending on how enemies are spaced out, you may need to position yourself in the center of them for his normal attack hitbox to reach them all. But this isn't really an issue since Wanderer can move while attacking. You can position him while dealing damage, which is something no other DPS can really do. You can also use his A4 dash to position yourself much faster. Now obviously, because I know there is going to be a Madge, but C6 Farazan doesn't exist, Madge comment, obviously, Wanderer's performance is not this high without a C6 Farazan, but I am specifically talking about people underrating his performance with C6 Farazan involved. Once Wanderer has a C6 Farazan, I believe he becomes the best DPS unit in the entire game. So considering how hard getting C6 Farazan can be, I think it's very reasonable for him to be that strong when you get it. Alright, with Venti, people act as if his crowd control is completely useless these days, and that Kazuha is just always better. However, this is really just not true. I feel like people make the mistake of thinking that Venti can only group very light enemies that get lifted up by his burst. But there are plenty of enemies that while he doesn't lift them, he still pulls, so his crowd control is actually way more universal than people think. Compared to Kazuha, Venti is able to provide his grouping with significantly less field time. Venti is also able to continuously group from off-field, while Kazuha cannot. This can result in Venti being significantly better in multi-wave scenarios, or situations where enemies can quickly ungroup after using Kazuha. With that said, Kazuha does have way more teams that he works well in due to his buffing, as well as many units not being able to hit in Venti's burst. However, thanks to C6 Farazan, a crit build Venti is actually very powerful in Wanderer teams. I know that's only one team, but Wanderer Hyper is one of, if not the best team in the game right now, so it is still very relevant. Venti's damage does still fall off in single target here, but his damage is still quite high. Baizhu is a character that I will never understand how people manage to downplay. The main thing I see with Baizhu is people comparing him directly to either Yao Yao or Kirara, or to Nahida. With comparing him to Yao Yao and Kirara, he is ultimately just better, especially compared to Yao Yao. Yao Yao has circle impact issues, less uptime than Baizhu, and can't heal the entire team without spending extra field time to use her burst. She also provides no buffing at all aside from her C1, which is only useful if using an on-field Dendro unit like Hytham. Comparatively, Baizhu has no circle impact issues, he has better uptime than Yao Yao, better buffing, provides interruption resistance via his micro shielding, and it can heal the entire team just by casting his skill. He's really just a direct upgrade over her. And compared to Kirara, she does have the advantage of providing a strong shield, but she doesn't have reliable off-field Dendro application like Baizhu does. And when it comes to comparing him to Nahida, something a lot of people seem to overlook is that you can change the structure of your team by having his role consolidation. For example, in an El Hytham Sprite team, he usually struggles to fit in a grouper. So let's just say, for example, your Hytham team is El Hytham, Nahida, Zhongli, Yai. There's no space for a grouper here unless you take out Nahida and lose all the value she provides, or unless you take out Zhongli and play without any defense. But comparatively, you could use something like Alhaitham, Baizhu, Yai, Kazuha. Now, you have Kazuha for both grouping and making Yai do a lot more damage. This is why you can't just compare Baizhu directly to Nahida, assuming you just replace Nahida with him and don't change anything else. So overall, Baizhu is just an incredible pick for basically any archetype of a Dendro team, which is very valuable. When it comes to Yai, the main thing that makes her underrated is people treating her as a side grade to Faishal. With Faishal versus Yai in a Dendro team, Faishal is very reliant on the on-field character being an aggravate driver in order to grant her a lot of A4 procs. If she isn't getting those A4 procs, her damage drops significantly. And if your on-field unit is Dendro, like Alhaitham, then you aren't going to get those A4 procs because spread is not an electro reaction. If Faishal is getting a low amount of A4 procs, Yai's damage can be quite significantly higher. Yai also is able to provide a good source of front-loaded damage with her burst, and she also still works in AoE, which are two things that Faishal does not have in her favor. And even outside of Dendro teams, Yai is still pretty underrated. For example, the value she provides to Raiden Hyper teams is something a lot of people seem to be unaware of. Compared to using a C6 Sara, Yai helps tremendously in multi-wave, as well as with energy between chambers, which is something that can be very troublesome for Raiden. Okay, I know I said this list isn't in any particular order, but I do firmly believe Cyno is the most underrated character in the entire game. And Cyno being number 1 should come as no surprise for those of you who have been here for a while. I firmly believe Cyno is the most unfairly doom-posted unit of all time. Most of the time when a unit gets unfairly doom-posted, it only lasts like at most one patch, then goes away. However, to this day, Cyno's doom-posting not only continues, but has arguably gotten even worse. There have been so many times where I see someone talk about Cyno in even a slightly positive way, they get called copium. The Cyno haters even have a name for it. They call it Cynopium anytime someone has even a slightly positive opinion about Cyno, as long as their opinion isn't completely negative. And as a black man, part of me wants to think it has something to do with the color of his skin. But hey, I won't go there. Still, I can't think of any other reason why he would still be this doom-posted. When he first released in 3.1, he was very underwhelming until Nahida came out the next patch. But do you know who else was very underwhelming back then? Nilou. Yet nobody gives her the same treatment. Cyno has also kept getting better since then as well. In 3.4, he got Yao Yao, which was the start of his double Dendro Quick Bloom teams. Then, he got Baizhu, which was a big upgrade over Yao Yao. We have also discovered his Chaos team since then as well. Cyno's main weakness is he can struggle with multi-wave due to not having Nahida's mark on the next wave. And while this is objectively a weakness that he has, it can reasonably be mitigated with double Dendro, or double Electro with Kuki, or Chaos. Multi-wave is still an issue, but it is an overstated issue. Cyno is also single target oriented, but he can still do pretty solid in AoE for a single target oriented DPS. To give an example, with the current Abyss, my 3 gold Cyno team can clear the top half Force Chamber faster than my 6 gold Hu Tao team, despite her having a grouper and double Hydro for the Lecter shield. So overall, I think he is much better at dealing with his weaknesses compared to other units with similar weaknesses. Furthermore, I've seen people try to claim that Cyno isn't as good as Keqing, that Raiden is stronger than him in teams with like Quick Bloom and Chaos. Both of these are not true. Cyno's Quick Bloom teams are very significantly stronger than Keqing's Aggravate teams. And if we compare Aggravate to Aggravate, I still find that, now that we have Baizhu, Cyno Aggravate does better than Keqing Aggravate. And when it comes to Cyno versus Raiden in Quick Bloom and Chaos teams, Cyno is absolutely better than her there. He can drive for way longer than she can, which results in him getting much more Hyper Blooms. Raiden also benefits from Elemental Mastery much less than Cyno, which results in her doing much less damage than him there. But yeah, that's about all I wanted to talk about today. If you liked today's video, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe. Please also leave a comment below letting me know your thoughts. Thanks. Bye.